Thanks to the latest Epstein dump, we now know who the banker's inside man in Britain was during and after the 2008 financial crash. Here's the most important snippet from the latest document dump. It's about Lord Peter Mandelson, and here's how Jeffrey Epstein describes him. Well, for all intents and purposes, Petey is now acting deputy prime minister. What was Jeffrey Epstein, who was in jail when that was written, and Lord Peter Mandelson doing in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crash? Remember, these discussions are going on while the bankers are being bailed out and the global financier elite are being saved. But instead of that story, here's what you're being inundated with. Now, if you read the TDS-infected press like The Guardian, you'll see headlines like, Trump news at a glance. Epstein Files release shows emails with Trump officials, past and present. Or on the other side of the political spectrum, Fox News focuses on new Epstein documents include photos of Bill Clinton, shirtless in hot tub, socializing with Michael Jackson. Or if you want to go hardcore British psyops, The Telegraph says Epstein's links to Putin and Kremlin spies raise fears he was a Russian agent. Now here's what they don't want you to think about. The 2008 financial crisis was never really solved. The banks got bailed out at the expense of the American taxpayers and the economy. And now Donald Trump is finally taking down that criminal free trade system of the global bankers. On the very same day these new Mandelson revelations came out, Donald Trump was busy dismantling what is left of that old world order with dramatic new economic moves, including the creation of a strategic critical minerals reserve. Now, if you think this is a coincidence, you haven't been paying attention. And most important, it's not about sex and blackmail. I'm Susan Kokinda, and for months, I've been telling you that the big reveal in the Epstein files was about Peter Mandelson and how it had more to do with the 2008 financial collapse and the banker's empire than it did plane trips to an island. So if you want to get above the noise and get the deeper story, hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons so we can stay in touch and we can reach more people. We're going to look at three things today. First, the new Epstein revelations on Mandelson and why Epstein called him the acting deputy prime minister during the 2008-2010 financial crisis. How President Trump is addressing the root causes of that financial collapse by abandoning the bankers' model of free trade. And third, how Project Vault, the new strategic mineral reserve, is a powerful reassertion of American economic sovereignty. So the real big casualty of this latest dump is Lord Peter Mandelson, the former British ambassador to the United States who had the assignment of trying to manage Donald Trump. That didn't work out so well. His was one of the first heads to roll in the first Epstein file release. He was forced to resign as ambassador. But now this new file dump has forced Mandelson to resign both from the Labour Party and to leave his seat in Parliament. And a few minutes ago, this headline just dropped. How King Charles could strip Mandelson of his peerage. Now, to the extent the American press has even mentioned Mandelson's resignations, they portray it as another disgusting episode in the world of jet-setting perverts. But that's only the subplot. They don't want you to look at the main storyline. Mandelson wasn't just socializing with Epstein. He was a top-level policy operative embedded in the British government, and the new files show devastating evidence that in 2009 and 2010, right in the middle of the financial crisis, Mandelson was leaking highly sensitive government information to Jeffrey Epstein. We're talking about advanced knowledge on bailouts and asset sales. Epstein was providing his clients with more than sexual services. Epstein was the fixer, Mandelson was the inside man. Remember, here's what Epstein told Ghislaine Maxwell in June 2009. That little Petey, which was his actual nickname for Mandelson, was for all intents and purposes practically the deputy prime minister. The real story is about policy. Perversions are the tool of the trade. So here's a few of the highlights of what little Petey did for Epstein. In June of 2009, he sent him a Downing Street memo on a £20 billion asset sale and said, interesting note that's just gone to the prime minister. 2 months later, he leaked a confidential banking memo 4 seconds after receiving it. In May of 2010, he tipped off about a 500 billion Eurozone bailout, saying, This should be announced tonight, just leaving number 10. And on May 10th, he gave Epstein advance notice of Gordon Brown's resignation. The prime minister finally got him to go today. But it gets worse. Mandelson wasn't just leaking, he was fixing. In one of the newly released files, Mandelson advises Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan, on the need to mildly threaten the Chancellor of the Exchequer. This is how the post-2008 system actually worked. A network of fixers, bankers, and political operatives, ensuring that governments served financial institutions with bailouts, not national interests. Epstein connected the money, Mandelson opened the doors. And now the system that protection racket served is being challenged by Donald Trump. So when you see little Petey resign now, it's not because of compromising pictures of him and his skivvies. The acting deputy prime minister of the globalist order has lost his mandate because the financial system, which was kept on artificial life support by the post-2008 bailouts, is being dismantled. Now, since he came back into office, Donald Trump has been taking a jackhammer to the globalist system. His new Fed chair appointee has gone on record saying that the perpetual bailout policy of the Fed post-2008 was a disaster, and he's going to end it. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said the mission of the government should be to support the real economy and household incomes, not the financial system. And now President Trump is cementing new trade deals, which throw free trade in the crapper. Now, the mainstream media wants to present Trump's policies as chaotic and disruptive, and it argues that it's the Europeans and people like Canada's Mark Carney who are the adults in the room. But let's look at who is failing their populations and who's actually protecting them. Now remember, just less than 2 weeks ago in Davos, Canada's Mark Carney and the EU's Ursula von der Leyen defiantly told the world that Europe, Canada, and the middle powers would forge their own way without Donald Trump's United States, and they would continue to carry the banner of free trade and windmills. Von der Leyen stood up on stage and boasted that the mother of all trade deals between the EU and India was coming, and it was signed on January 27th. As promised, that deal was based on the twin pillars of free trade and the fraud of climate change and green energy. But less than a week later, President Trump closed an American deal with Prime Minister Modi's India. In addition to reducing tariffs on both sides, which will go down to zero for U.S. exports to India, the deal announced a huge purchase of American goods by India. President Trump announced it in a Truth Social post. He said, the Prime Minister also committed to buy American at a much higher level in addition to over $500 billion of U.S. energy, technology, agriculture, coal, and other products. $500 billion in purchases from key sectors of the American physical economy. Now circle back to the European deal. They got no specific purchase commitments, hoping that the magic of the marketplace will, I guess, do its magic. And it's not just India where the globalists aren't faring so well with their trade deals. The EU trade deal with South American nations in Mercosur has sent Europe on fire. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of farmers are demonstrating in Brussels, Paris, Ireland, and elsewhere because that deal will bring cheap South American products into Europe and wipe out what is left of their farmers. And let's not forget ex-central banker and now Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who went to China last month and came back with a trade agreement that will open the Canadian market to Chinese EVs and finish off what's left of the Canadian auto industry. So much for the Europeans being the responsible adults defending the rules-based order from Donald Trump, the disruptor. Now, if you're beginning to realize that you're not hearing this from the mainstream press or your favorite influencers, you need to head over to Promethean Action and get our free newsletter. President Trump doesn't need a bunch of Monday morning quarterbacks second-guessing his every move. He needs people who are on the battlefield with him, and that's where we will put you. Because the need to get up above the noise and see the real fight can't be made any clearer than what we've already shown you. Now, it gets even more interesting. Yesterday, President Trump was asked about Mandelson's resignation, and after saying that he hadn't heard about it, he took the opportunity to point out this.
I really don't know too much about it. I know who he is. It's too bad. Speaking of Epstein, I will say this. a reporter named Wolf and Epstein conspired. This just came out yesterday in the millions of pages of documents, how crazy this is, conspired against me in order to fight like hell to make sure I lose the election. That's the only thing that was mentioned about me. Now, about Democrats, some really bad stuff, but about me, that Wolf, whoever Wolf is, he wrote a book, a couple of books, and Epstein conspired against me.
But then the president said something even more important.
You know, when Epstein was alive, nobody cared about him. When he's dead, they care about him. But it's really a Democrat problem. It's not a Republican, it's a Democrat problem. The only problem Republicans have is that we have to get back to, number one, running our country, and then number two, very importantly, letting the public know what a great job we're doing. We have the greatest economy in the history of the world. We have $18 trillion being spent. The record was $3 trillion many years ago, not by us, by another country. I won't say the country.
Now, let's talk about how President Trump is building the greatest economy in the world. It is by rejecting everything that Mandelson and Carney and von der Leyen have spent their careers protecting, and by returning to the American system. You've been told your economic choices are free trade capitalism or some version of big government socialism. You have to choose one or the other. Let the markets destroy your living standards or let the government spending increase inflation. The American system is neither. It partners the government with private industry in ways that foster actual physical production. And on Monday, President Trump announced a stunning example of that. He announced Project Vault, the creation of a U.S. strategic critical minerals reserve supported by the Export-Import Bank. And here's how the head of the Exim Bank described it.
Thank you, Mr. President. The President gave us a very clear directive. By clear directive, it was much more of an order for us to figure out how to, for the first time in American history, create a strategic critical minerals reserve in a way that would benefit the non-military manufacturing complex. And the challenge was enormous, not simply because it had never been done before, Mr. President, but we knew that you expected us to deliver in a big way, in a way that was scalable, in a way that was designed for long-term success, and in a way that would help revitalize our domestic mining industry. But most importantly, most crucially, that it not be subsidized by American taxpayers. And so that's exactly what we've done. Mr. President, what you've announced today is a truly uniquely American solution. It brings together our capital markets, which are the best and biggest in the world, with our manufacturers, our innovators, our miners, all pitching in to make this possible.
Now, if you understand American economic history, you'll recognize what's happening here. The Exim Bank is being transformed into something resembling a mini national bank, a public-private partnership where government credit is directed towards strategic physical production, not financial speculation. And credit means the money gets paid back with interest. Now, Secretary Scott Bessent drilled down on the systemic importance of this. He's saying that we will no longer be a nation left to the mercy of a globalist-run free trade system.
As you always say, economic security is national security, and a country does not have sovereignty if we don't have control of our critical minerals, don't have control of our steel production and our industrial base. And thanks to the work of everyone here through your leadership, this was a public-private partnership that only you could have assembled, and we are taking back our sovereignty, and we are going to have this Vault project, a strategic mineral reserve. And I can't tell you how innovative and exciting this is, and the level of security it is going to give us going forward is phenomenal.
So let's look at what we covered. For decades, power came from controlling the money, controlling the free trade system, and subjugating nations and populations. Mandelson and Epstein were cogs in that imperial machine. Trump and his team are muscling that system aside and restoring the American system. A system you aren't even supposed to know about. Remember, 2 weeks ago, our trade ambassador, Jameson Greer, gave a speech at Davos entitled, "The Hamiltonian Economic System That Too Many Have Forgotten." Now, here at Promethean Action, we never forgot the American system. And that's why we've been at the forefront of the fight to support the Trump administration's revival of it. Paid memberships and contributions to Promethean Action will help us build this movement. So please go to our website and join up. Because Mandelson's fall isn't just a scandal. It represents something much bigger. The fixers who manage the old system are being exposed at the same time that the globalist system itself loses its grip, thanks to Donald Trump. That's the real story this week. This has been your midweek update. Thanks for watching.